Welcome again to Profiles, an original production of Nantucket Community Television, Channel 18. I'm Charlie Walters. My guest today is David Brown, who is the president of the Nantucket Preservation Trust, and he's here to tell us what that organization is and does. Thank you, David.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
I'm going to start by just reading out the mission statement, which is only a sentence long, but this will be a good springboard for the rest of the conversation. Our mission is to advance the preservation of Nantucket's interior and exterior architectural history for the benefit of current and future generations. This is a private organization. The HDC worries about exterior.
Correct.
You worry about that, but also the interior.
Right.
Tell us some of the ways you do that.
Well, we do not have authority over the interior, as HDC has authority over the exterior. But what we do have is an effort to try to educate people in terms of if they have a historic house basically in the historic area, how to deal with that. If they're new, we urge them to be sensitive to what they do inside. If they are there and want to have a house consultation, we provide a 1-hour free consultation, generally with 2 or 3 people. They will go through the details, architectural details of the house inside, help them to understand them, and make suggestions about how they may keep them or rehab them, whatever.
There's something going on increasingly, it seems, gut rehabs, which is if someone buys a house built in, say, 1840, and they just knock down every wall and rip up all the floors and then make it in their own way.
Right.
This is the sort of thing that you are talking about.
Yes, we don't think that is the right way by any means to go. You may remember some years ago we had a bumper sticker, "Gut fishes, not houses."
Yes, you still see
And
them
the
around.
gutting issue is an unfortunate one. In many cases, these houses have considerable historic elements that you do not want to have lost, if possible. Helping to educate the people who own the house is one way. And the consultations that we do adds to that. We keep trying to educate the world because we don't have this authority. But we do have one area where we have specific authority, and that is if the owner of a historic house wants to place part or all of its inside or outside under easement with us, we will then hold that easement. We become essentially deeded owners of that particular aspect that they would put under easement.
Now tell us how that works.
Well, they would come to us, they would indicate, we would look at it, they'd indicate what they're considering. We would assess it. And this is not a fast system. It takes a while. Let's say we all conclude that it is worth this preservation. They're comfortable about it because it travels with the house. As the house would be sold
From owner to
subsequently,
owner, that
right.
easement remains.
It's just like a deeded easement that you would have for access to through your neighbor's yard, or
And it's not removable.
it is not removable. And its placement is done ultimately by going to the state legislature in Boston, and then if agreed, then to the governor for signature, then back here to the selectmen. And if they agree, then the easement can be placed.
Now, does the Preservation Trust guide this through this process?
Yes. Yes.
You have representatives there wherever they happen to be, whether it's the Board of Selectmen or the state legislature.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, we would participate in any hearing or any presentation attempt.
And what costs are associated with getting an
That
easement?
can be. It depends. It has some costs of probably $15,000 or maybe more. Partly depending on the extent of the easement, because we will have to defend that easement through subsequent ownership. And we will have the obligation to inspect that property, the easement part of the property, on a regular basis to make sure that it is being conformed to. And if a purchaser comes in and wants to change it, then they have to come. And there is a possibility that with our board, they can get agreement to make some change in it. It is possible. But without that, they can't do it.
So they can change the terms. I'm looking into the future.
They can't change the terms.
But what is it they can't
The only thing
change?
that if they came to us and they wanted to make a change, and our board, the board of the Preservation Trust,
Yes,
agreed with that,
yes.
then at that point, the terms could be changed.
And when you say the terms, what would an example of the term be? Changing a feature of the house?
Yes. Or let's say you have a paneled wall with a fireplace, and it had a certain kind of mantle, and somebody subsequently decided they didn't like that mantle, they wanted to make the mantle different. That would require us to agree that that would not be harmful to the rest of the easement, and short of that, they have to preserve that easement, or preserve the mantle.
Now, does this go so far as to talk about the color of a room?
I don't believe we've ever done that.
I mean, theoretically, it could, but it hasn't so far.
That would be a hard one because if something happened that it would have to be repainted and the color might not be available, I think we'd be very reluctant. Now, I don't think we've ever gotten into the issue of the color of the wall, but if it's a fundamental aspect of the historic nature of the house, that would have to be consulted. We would have to be consulted on it, and we'd be reasonable to the extent of the reality that would be available in terms of the color and so forth. But,
And furnishing, I assume, has nothing to do with what
we have no. It's totally portable. It's not
Yes.
preservable.
Now, maybe the
By
most visible aspect of the Preservation Trust work are the markers on the houses, which are all over the historic district. Talk about those.
Well, the markers are a very, as you say, visible. They're very informative because it gives the date, it gives the name of the original builder, and normally it gives what the builder's occupation was.
The original builder, not the
Right.
original owner.
No.
I mean, these are the,
Well, the constructor, and it may be the same. It may be the
yes,
same.
yeah.
It would be the original owner, not the somebody constructing it.
yes.
Yeah.
These are roughly half moon shaped and they're white and gray.
And
if you look carefully, you will spot them.
And they're on a fan light.
Yes.
And that fan light is not a real fan light, but you'll notice there are many houses in town that have those solid fan lights. They're not fans. They're not lights. Fans over windows. They are actually over wood.
Are they always in the front of the house?
Over the main door.
Over the main door?
Main door.
Always over
and
the
they
main
were
door.
and they were generally in the more upscale houses.
And precisely what does that indicate?
Well, it indicates
Aside from
age,
the obvious.
the age.
But how do you, aside from that, how do you get one?
Well, you would get them by coming to us, and then we will do the deed research to confirm the date, the occupant, first occupant, and the occupation if we can, and then that would be the information that would then go on it, and then we would create it and hang it.
And all the work and the charge would be borne by the Preservation Trust, or is this?
Oh, well, no.
This is something the owner
you would have the
pay to do.
opportunity. You would have the opportunity to purchase one, and then we would put it up, do it, and put it up.
So when you see one of these markers, you can be assured that that house has not been gut rehabbed. And
No,
I mentioned that.
I would say no, because
No,
it's
you-
not interior. That is an exterior
It's
sign. That
it's
is exterior.
only.
Remember, it goes to the original owner, and that owner, in my case, is 1804. So there have been a number of other occupants subsequent to that and to us. So that only goes to the exterior.
I see. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I assumed it
Yeah.
was everything.
Now
you
we
were
are
gonna be
we
seeing.
are undertaking a major study on interiors, and there are roughly 850 pre-Civil War houses in town, and this study is focused on those, and we're trying to see what condition they are in, and then have them listed, sort of 1, 2, 3 or ABC, in terms of the quality of the interior. And that is partly being done by NPT, but we're also in conjunction with the University of Florida's Preservation Institute in Nantucket, or PIN, which
You are not connected with that.
but we're not connected, but we are collected. We're working together.
Yes.
And interestingly, they have come up with the concept of doing laser measurements inside.
Tell us about
So
that.
we have now, I think we have completed our investigation in about 550 houses. Of
Really?
the 850. The first year is just passed, and we have one more year to work on this. But the laser technique is quite fascinating because in some cases, and it can't be in every house, even if everybody wanted it, because it takes a while. They come in and they measure everything in that house on laser, and they measure moldings, doors, everything, and then duplicate that into plans. They can do 3D modeling of the house, the building.
Huh.
It's fascinating. So they're doing. They can only. It takes about. I think it takes 6 hours or so to do a normal size house. So they can't do every one by any means if everybody wanted it, but it's fascinating, and it's going to give such an accurate record of that interior. Very useful to architects and useful to owners.
Well, I was just going to say, if someone bought a house that had been gutted, but they wanted it to return to the original design, if the laser work had been done at some point in the past, they could recreate that original
Well,
design.
that of course would be true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing is, if it had been gutted, it's going to be probably not. It probably will not have been under the laser technique because that's quite recent.
It's recent, so it probably
yeah.
wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But they might be able to compare it with a similar house that had the laser treatment.
Right.
A
Certainly,
house that
or-
had not been gut
Or they
rehabbed.
could at least find some elements that they could then duplicate in
Yes.
that house.
I mean,
if they
it's hard to
wanted
find houses that are exactly alike on Nantucket, but there are a lot of houses that have a lot of similarities
Right,
to
exactly.
other houses.
Yeah.
There's a house in my neighborhood that I know pretty well, and it hadn't really been touched since the 1840s when it was built, and it was redone recently, and I looked in when the door was open one day, and there was nothing left. But if a subsequent owner, as I just said,
Right.
wanted it to return to what it had been, there's at least a possibility of being able to do that with a high degree of historical accuracy.
The hope is that we can always find the next buyer before that happens, and then keep them from doing it. But that doesn't always happen.
You seek them out, in other words. You try to keep track
We try. Yes,
of-
we try
with
for new
buildings.
purchases. We try to contact them and and catch them early on.
Now, this summer, the Preservation Trust brought Paul Goldberger down to the
Right.
island. He'd written for the New Yorker, the New York Times, Vanity Fair. First of all, tell us how you got him down here, what the occasion was, and then we'll talk about what he was talking about.
Okay. Well, the occasion for us this time, because he has been
here before.
for three times. This is his third time, over maybe 10 years. But this time we had, for the first time for us, a symposium on architecture, exterior, interior, and landscape, focused on Nantucket's golden age,
Which
pre-Civil
was
War,
pre-Civil War.
heyday of the whaling captain. And we did a 3-day program, and he was the keynote speaker. And I'll come back to that. But what we did the next day, 2 days, we did a focus on town with lectures from some national speakers and some local speakers from our environmental area. And then we took case studies of some work being done to show how some of the restorations can or are being done. And then we had open house tours. The next day we did Wisconsin, and we took them out touring the summer homes of the people who had the big houses on Main Street, and some other houses, and then brought them back. And it was a very well-received program.
Well, I was at the Unitarian Church when Goldberger spoke, and the room was filled.
I know.
What's that, 500 people or something
They were
along
not
those lines?
all signed up for our, because we opened it up. We opened up that. We would have loved to have had them all, but, didn't get them.
Well, speaking as a layperson, he used a term I had not heard before. Maybe it's been around for a long time, but he spoke about what he called architectural fundamentalism in the context of Nantucket. And I agreed with what he was saying, but I hadn't expected to be hearing it from him. What he was saying was, when you get outside of the historic district, maybe things are a little too strict in terms of what is going to be approved by the HDC or whatever. He was pointing out that this is a living community, and if you try to preserve it in amber, that may not really be what you want to do. I was fascinated.
But we thought he was highly provocative, which, bringing a critic up, is likely to be the case.
Well, I think he was, but not for the sake of being provocative.
No, but he was going to open up issues that are useful to have debated and discussed. And certainly in terms of the historic districts, town and Sconset, in the historic buildings, not just houses but buildings, he's much more. I don't want to say fundamentalist, since he didn't contend that he is, but in reality, he, I think, is much more keeping in the same way of preservation that these buildings are in need of or are having. We certainly find, though, and we used to have for 9 years a house kitchen or historic house kitchen tour in July, and one of the concept of that was that people could come in and see in a historic house how the kitchen was being used, and that kitchen is rarely going to be of the true historic nature, because cooking has changed and everything about it, and kitchens certainly, and bathrooms are things that were not there in 1796, 1804, whatever. So those are things that the evolution of a house, it's a place where people lived, and therefore it's going to change. There are changes that have to be made. It's not a museum.
Correct.
And that's I think, a distinction in terms of a lot of the buildings we have, the technology has come in. We have telephones, we have electric lights, things that are put into these houses or buildings, churches and NHA houses, buildings, and so forth. That is clearly not original. So when we talk preservation, we're not saying it can never change. It has changed, but we're wanting
probably always will on
the
some level.
historic elements that are architectural that can be preserved. That's what we're hoping people will want to do.
Well, it opens up all sorts of interesting questions because if you look closely at houses, even in the historic district, some of them will have features that might not get through the HDC in 2017. Or if you really look closely, there are a few stucco houses on Nantucket. There are only maybe a half a dozen of them. But if you wanted to build a stucco house today, probably not. But the ones that are here, including the ones, there are at least 3 in the historic district, I don't think they look out of place.
They probably predate the Historic District
Oh,
Commission.
by
So consequently,
decades, if not
that's
centuries.
right.
But
That's
there's the
right.
Fair Street Museum.
That's right.
Part of the Mariah Mitchell property is stucco, and the large house on Gardner Court,
Yeah.
just off of Main
That's
Street,
right.
very
That's
large stucco structure.
Up above Stone Alley, yeah.
All 3 of those, I think, are very attractive structures. But do they fit the traditional Nantucket shingle style? No,
Yeah.
but in those cases, I think it's all right.
Thus, since it is pre-HDC, we don't have any comment in that sense.
Yeah.
But in addition, it doesn't mean that everything has to be just the same.
Exactly. And
That's-
that was what Goldberger was getting
That's
at.
exactly, yes.
You don't want a cookie cutter approach
No.
to everything all the time.
We're not a museum. We're not a Williamsburg,
No.
where we're trying to show what it was then. We are a living
Yes.
area with people living in these houses, and we want the living community to flourish, but preserve the elements for the future.
It's not even a Sturbridge Village where
No, because
the buildings are all original buildings, but they weren't in those original places. They've been moved from surrounding areas to what's now called Sturbridge Village. And I don't think anybody actually lives in any of them. I mean, it's a fascinating place to see, but it's not authentic in the way Nantucket is.
it's much more museumish.
Yes, it is.
If that's a word.
Yes. Well, now, another example that comes to mind about some of the things we're talking about is the house that used to be in Pulpus. And it was a pink house on the water in Pulpus. And there were very few places where you could see it.
Right.
You could see it from Pacama Head. But it was a modern design and had been painted pink, predating the HDC by many years. So it could be pink as long as the owner wanted it to be pink. Well, it changed hands, I think in the 90s, and it was torn down. They received permission to tear it down. They tore it down. A year or 2 later, it came out that that house was one of the early designs of Philip Johnson, the great American architect of the
Right.
20th century. Now, had that fact been known, maybe the house would still be standing. Did it have anything to do with Nantucket architecture? No.
No.
But did it have some historic importance? Yes.
You're right.
And it's been
You're
lost.
absolutely right.
Yeah, it's unfortunately been lost.
We agree.
I don't know how Paul Goldberg would think about it, but I suspect I know.
I think he would probably, under what he was saying that night at least, I think he would have said it should stay.
Yes, I think he probably
Yeah.
would too. And I think you would have been right. Tell us where your offices are right now as we speak and where they are about to be.
We are at 55 Main Street on the 3rd floor, sort of a garret, above Brock Insurance. Between Congdon and Coleman and Brock Insurance is the entrance. And later September, some point, We're not exactly sure of the date. We will be moving to 11 Center Street.
Just around the corner.
That is Sherburne Hall. We'll be on the second floor in Sherburne Hall. And we will be working together with University of Florida's PIN group, which I mentioned, sharing the space and sharing a big meeting room, which is a wonderful space, high and large, which we can use for meetings, for presentations.
It's like a small ballroom almost.
It's exactly. And so we'll be there. We're excited about this change. It'll give us much more visibility.
Well, it's a nice space.
It's architecturally, it's very nice space. It's terrific. So we're hoping September it works, but supposedly.
Before we go, tell us how you came to Nantucket and how you got involved in the Preservation Trust.
Well, we came in 1992, and we're looking at I had a college classmate who was living here, and he suggested that if we were ever going to get serious about coming here, we should do that then, because the market was beginning to rise. So we decided we would. We had been coming some, but we vacationed in a variety of areas. And we had dogs. And initially we thought, well, carting the dogs along with the children or the son and, and all the stuff, it's a little trickier. But it's a pretty nice place. So we started, and we bought in 93. And then we moved to our current 1804 house in 1987.
And what about the trust?
The trust, we started going to things that the trust had, and I guess I've been on the board for 8 years.
One of several hats you wear or have worn
right.
on Nantucket.
It's the biggest it's the biggest hat in comparison to how much time I spent. that's a time.
Well, it's almost like a full-time job, I would
Well,
think.
it's when I'm off island, we're often on the phone, so it's
But it's
never too far away.
It's a
strictly
volunteer position.
Yeah. All of our board is volunteer. Yeah, we have a staff of an excellent executive director, Michael May, who's well known and does a lot here in terms of participating with advice to the HDC and the Wisconsin Trust, and is generally quite visible. And we have currently we have one terrific assistant, and then we will be getting another. We will need that as a minimum, and that's what typically we operate with. And the board is, I guess we would be called a hands-on board.
You've been holding in your lap a booklet, which we'll get a separate photo of to put on during the show. It's called Ramblings. Tell us about that.
Ramblings has now been been published for 10 years. This is the 11th year. And it is available all season long. We print about 10,000 copies. We distribute them. They have a lot of information in terms of both our activities for that particular season and also just very interesting preservation-related information. And it also gives you how to reach us. It gives you the address. We'll give you the new address in the next one. You'll be able to find us, and the website will not change. That's nantucketpreservation.org, and so that will have the new address.
And Ramblings is available where?
You'll see them around town in many places, and they are free.
Including at your
Just take
office,
it
I assume.
At the office on the third floor of the current 55 Main.
Good. David Brown, thank you for coming by.
Well,
This
it's
is-
my pleasure. I appreciate
I hope it's been your
the
pleasure. It's certainly been
opportunity.
mine.
Thank you.
Thank you. For Profiles, I'm Charlie Walters. Thanks for tuning in, and please tune in again next time.